Good afternoon and welcome to the Pervasive Media Studio online lunchtime talk. These are live every Friday at 1 p.m, beaming out onto your smartphones, laptops, iPads and living room televisions. My name's Martin O'Leary and I'm the Pervasive Media Studio's creative technologist. These talks are our chance to throw open the digital doors of the Pervasive Media Studio and for you to hear more from the people who are part of our community or who are working on things that excite us. An especially big welcome to those of you who are new to the studio, for whom this may be the first time you're engaging with us. And for all of you newcomers, here's a little bit about what we do. The Pervasive Media Studio is a diverse and collaborative community exploring creativity and technology, everything from comedy to coding, product development to performance art. We're a partnership between Watershed, the University of the West of England and the University of Bristol. And we're a home for early ideas, companies and a meeting place of both the creative and commercial industries. We're a studio space, offering desk space, meeting rooms, events and opportunities, all for free for our residents. And most of all, we're a safe space for artists to take risks in their practice and make time for collaboration. Now, this week's talk is by Bronnie, McCarthy and Michael Armstrong from BBC Research and Development. They'll be talking about their new tools for building interactive and immersive experiences and how you too can get your hands on them. There'll be a Q&A at the end and the talk runs at roughly 40 minutes. If you want to ask any questions, just pop them into the chat window. I'll pick them out to ask Bronnie and Michael. Or if you like, you can tweet your questions to @PMStudioUK. A captioned version of the talk will be available here after the talk is finished. Now, before we start, next week's talk is by studio resident David Smee. He'll be talking about his journey into the world of startups and how children's toys can help stop animal extinction. You can get news on all of our future talks by following us on @PMStudioUK on Twitter or @Pervasive Media Studio on Instagram, some great consistent branding there. Or you can subscribe to our newsletter on our website. Please don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel, give the video a thumbs up. The more subscribers we get, the more likes we get, the more we can share stories like this. And please feel free to share this link now on any of your socials. But for now, I'm going to hand over to Bronnie and Michael.
Hello, my name's Bronnie McCarthy. I'm a producer for BBC R&D.
And I'm Michael Armstrong, and I am nominally a senior R&D engineer at BBC R&D. But I also work across story structure, storytelling, and human cognition issues. So quite a wide brief.
Brilliant. Is that all up on my screen? Can everyone see that? Brilliant. Okay, so thank you all so much for coming today. I can't see you, but it's brilliant to have people with us. So just to kick off today, I'm going to give you a little bit of an introduction to Connected Studio Makerbox, give you a little bit of information about who we are, what we do, how you can get your hands on the tools that we've got to offer, and how you can get involved with us. So just for a little bit of context, Connected Studio has been going for about 8 years now. And although the way in which we work has changed, particularly in the last year or so, our focus remains the same, and that's driving the adoption of technology. So we do this in a number of ways. So transforming R&D technology and helping find new routes to market for both BBC tools and third-party tools. We then test this innovation in the real world through live trials and events. Obviously, this has had to change quite a lot in the last year for reasons I'm sure I don't need to explain. But going to festivals like Edinburgh Festival, MozFest, we run workshops, we have partnerships with other organisations and other sections of the BBC. So we run hacks, we do news hacks. We've actually got one coming up in June. If anyone would like to find out any more about that, I can send you some information. We also aim to stimulate the creative economy through collaborations and opportunities. So, for example, BBC R&D are partners in the Culture UK initiative, and we've partnered with the UK's arts sector to get more people participating in the arts. So we're playing a role in this initiative by offering partners the opportunity to use our tools and technologies and to benefit from our skills and our expertise. We do actually currently have an open call for submissions for Dance Passion UK. So we're looking for creative technologists, producers, etc., to collaborate with dance companies and to apply for funding for short films and interactive projects. I believe we're going to share a link in the chat. So hopefully, if that is of interest to you, it will then inspire more people to be involved in the world of dance. We also have a workshop on Wednesday. I know it's short notice, but Wednesday, the 19th of May, if you'd like to get involved, just pop something in the chat and we can pick that up later. And fourth, finally, by no means least, most importantly, we aim to build a community of practice to facilitate the uptake of this new innovation. Just move my slide on. There we go. Brilliant. So we launched BBC Makerbox back in October 2019. And this is just a little definition of who we are and what we do. So Makerbox connects curious minds to the tools, community, and resources to inspire them to create the future of digital content. So Makerbox is able to do this in 3 ways: through discover, learn, connect. So discover, we want users to discover the latest tools and technology, both that the BBC has made or that we have licensed from third parties, and allowing them to experiment with the creative application. So it's open publicly for anybody to use, anybody to try, but we are also targeting our own teams in order to create the most personalised and the best BBC content for our audiences. So we want teams to learn from each other in order to make the best content possible. So we're targeting producers, producer developers, creative technologists, digital artists, all people like you. And we want to start working with people who have experimented with us before and with these type of technologies, but also with a keen eye on those who may have been interested in the past, but for some reason there's something that's holding them back, whether it's they don't think they've got enough time or they don't think they have the right skills to create stuff in this way. So that's why we've introduced case studies as part of Makerbox. I'll talk a little bit more about these a little bit later on, but it's a nice way to break down the barrier for people who may have never worked on digital formats before. So allowing them to see what other BBC teams or another partner that we've collaborated with have made, hopefully will inspire them to make something themselves as well. And really importantly, we're looking to create a community of practice to connect with this community where makers and technologists can partner together on new work, but also build on top of technology that we may have already open sourced. So community of practice, really, really important part of Makerbox. And this is just a little quote. It's a definition of a community of practice that we like to use to frame what we like to do. So a community of practice is a group of people who have a passion for something they do, learn how to do it better as they regularly interact. So building this community of practice is a really important part of what we're trying to achieve. It's critical to our success, and having an engaged community of people making things and learning from us and learning from each other will only help us to achieve our future vision. So Makerbox is built around a community of practice in 3 ways. The first, of course, being the tools, which hopefully you're excited to hear about in a moment. So offering our tools and technologies to play with fuels participation for people. We have a variety of different tools. Some are made by BBC R&D, some are from other departments within the BBC, and some we've licensed from third parties. So we want people to experiment with different formats, test the tools' capabilities, really get their teeth into them, and hopefully drive the adoption of new ways of thinking and making content. So some of the tools that we have are currently available. We currently have licenses for third-party tools. Others we've tried in the past, we no longer have the licenses for, but most importantly, we've taken that learning from these tools and put it back into the community. We've got a whole wealth of knowledge and we didn't want it to get lost. So we put it back into the community through case studies. So touched on these very briefly earlier, but they're a really nice way for us to share people's experiences of using the tools, our experiences as well. Good way to reel people in and inspire them to create something, as well as leveling the playing field for people with less experience. So when people do request our tools, when we give them access, we ask that they feed back to us on their experience. It's a really important part of the process and the relationship between us and building this community of practice. So we ask them to do that either in the style of a case study or a community forum. So nothing new here really. There's lots of forums out there. We're using Discourse for our community, which allows us to test out something extra as well. We've never used Discourse before, but we're not starting from scratch. As I mentioned, we've been going for about 8 years now. And so we've already built up quite an established connected studio community of production teams and people from the wider industry. And we wanted to find a way to bring all of these people together and create bigger partnerships and create more benefit for these people. It's a great way for us to unearth conversations, share our wealth of knowledge, and get others to do the same with us and with each other. So what kind of technology are we looking at? So when looking at the tools that teams can use, we've split them out into themes rather than just focusing on random tools, looking at what's in line with our own strategy, but also looking at what people are going to be most excited about, what's trending in the market, what teams are really, really excited to experiment with. So these are just a few of the areas that we focused on within Makerbox. As I mentioned earlier, some of them are BBC made, some of them are licensed, which enables us to scale our experimentation without us being a bottleneck into these tools. So we're able to drive the adoption of technology and new digital formats by testing a number of different products under one theme. So we want people to be able to learn from these experiments and take them on into their future trials and their future products. So that was a real whistle-stop tour of Makerbox. Here is just a link to Makerbox if you are interested. Please check us out. And if you'd like further information, you can email me directly or email makerbox@bbc.co.uk. We will share all of this with you as well. So don't panic to take a picture of the screen or anything. But I'm now going to pass over to Michael, who is going to talk to you about a couple of the tools.
Right, share my screen, get the right one. Is that coming through? So I'm going to talk about two of the tools that have come from BBC R&D. The first is from our audio team, and the second is from the team I work with, which is working on tools for what we call object-based media. Although actually the first one we call object-based as well. So back one slide. The first one is called Audio Orchestrator. This is a tool that's been created to overcome some of the sort of domestic issues with surround sound and immersive audio. Getting it to the audience is a bit tricky. The issue is we can't really expect all our members of our audience to have great, wonderful, immersive speaker arrays like the kind of thing you'll get in a university laboratory or in our listening room where we have arrays of 20 or so speakers. It just doesn't work for the home environment. So the idea in the living room is that we take the sort of devices that you have around the home. Some of us are lucky enough to have enough space for a 5.1 audio system, but for most people, what you have around the room are internet connected devices these days, your smartphone, your tablet, or your smart speaker. Each of those can provide audio. So this toolkit gets us to the point of using all of those devices as additional audio sources to immerse the audience in sound. We do some work, quite a bit of work with binaural audio and releasing surround sound as binaural experiences, but that's of necessity, because you're wearing headphones, a solitary experience. So this is a way of making it a shared experience between a number of people, not just sitting there with headphones on. So the first test of this approach was to build a piece called the Vostok-K Incident, which was produced by writing rules in code and plugging loudspeakers on the fly. It's out there, it's on Taster, I think, still. I have to double check, but the principle of it was to distribute the various sounds of the pilot's wireless feed and the aeroplane and things around the room, around the devices. So from there, the team have moved on and created a workflow in Audio Orchestrator, which allows you to start with a digital audio workstation of your choice, so any tool you're working with, to then orchestrate it, as it were, turn it into a set of audio files that you can that are combined together with data, and then preview and export them for playback. So the orchestrator sets up, you import the audio from the digital audio workstation and you set up a structure of linked sequences. Now you'll see something about linked sequences later. This is a different way of doing it, different representation, but it's the same sort of principle of joining bits of content together so that they work together. You then create controls to get the information from the listeners. So this is like, how many devices have you got? What sort of devices are they? Because you don't want to put a big rumbling bass sound on a little mobile phone, but on the other hand, a telephone conversation would be highly appropriate. You import the audio objects and add the behaviors that decide where they go. So which item, and then you customize the appearance of the experience and preview and export it. So that's Audio Orchestrator, and it's a great tool. We've had a lot of interest from people who already work in the audio field. And if you want to know more about that, get in touch through the Makerbox website, and they can put you directly in touch with the audio team if necessary. There is quite a bit of documentation online. So the second piece I'm going to talk to you about, the second tool, is called StoryKit, which is a suite of tools for interactive and responsive storytelling, and more specifically StoryFormer, which is the tool that allows the creation. So first, an explanation about what we call object-based media. It's a name we give to creating content which can be assembled at as late a point as possible. And if it's assembled whilst you're watching it or listening to it, then it can respond to your actions or interact with other things going on at the time. The media is a collection of objects and associated metadata. That can be audio, video, or images, and they can be assembled on the fly in lots of different ways, depending on the design of the item. So the idea being, excuse me, if we look at linear media production, what we have done for many, many years is take the component parts, package them up as a finished item, single finished item, we transmit them, and then they are displayed as a one-size-fits-all option for the audience. Doesn't matter what size or shape your screen is, you only get the rectangular image and you only get the stereo audio. So our approach is to take those original objects, the components of an experience or of a program, if you like, and this time we package them up separately with instructions on how to put them together. And those instructions can also include instructions on how you might assemble them differently under different circumstances. We then transmit the whole kit of parts, and they can then be reassembled in different ways for different devices. Now, also in different ways for different responses from the audience. This is what we call our IKEA diagram. It was produced by one of our people a long time ago, and it has always been the best explanation we've been able to come up with. So, early object-based media demonstrations. 4 examples here. The first 2 are narratives, so that the narrative changes in response to something that the audience is doing. The first one was a variable length radio program, quite challenging, very detailed, lots of programming, lots of discovery about how things go together, 99 different objects. And at the end of it, we got a radio program, which you could enjoy 12 minutes long or 14 minutes long, but it just came out like a radio program, which was interesting to try and demonstrate the flexibility that we had encapsulated, because you couldn't see the join, which was great, but very hard work. You can't produce one of those a week when it takes about a year to create. The second item we did was called Cake. Now, this is an interesting exercise in placing the audience at the center of the story. So most cookery programs are very passive. People who watch cookery tend not to actually cook that much. So this is putting you, the audience, in the heart of this as the cook. The experience allowed you to calculate the recipe requirements, even do a shopping list, I think, at the beginning. Then you could start the experience, and it would give you the instructions as you went along, and it would wait for you. And if you were late doing something, it would reorganize the items. At the end of it, you got a meal to eat. Again, quite labor intensive, in fact, very labor intensive in places. We worked with University of Newcastle on this and learned an awful lot. One of the things is we can't produce lots of these different programs in this way. The presentation ones created were the forecaster you see, where we created a weather forecast as a series of objects, so you could change the overlays. We could replace the presenter with a sign language presenter. We could alter the layout. And finally, the origami experience. This was a co-production with BBC Arts. Again, you were the center of this because you were making the origami item as it went along. Again, it waited for you. And this had the option of alternative views. So all quite labor intensive. So we created some tools. This is our authoring tool, StoryFormer, which is available for from Makerbox. It is basically a node-based tool. Each node or element can contain media objects and can contain the logic that allows it to go together. I'll give you a demonstration of this in a minute. We've so far had 4 main productions that have come through our work using this tool. Click 1000 was their 1000th episode, which the team themselves created. So this was about transferring the ability to make these interactive content as a production, not as an engineering exercise. Instagramification was a piece about Instagram, which used data that questions it asked you at the beginning and then gave you alternative versions of the same program. And then Discover Your Dæmon was an interactive trail for His Dark Materials, the first series. And that was created with the Trails team and is still up and is still seeing about 400 or 500, maybe up to 1,000 visits per day at the moment, because you share the demon that you reach at the end of it on social media, and that is keeping it going. All of these, I think we can say, were quite successful. We have seen visits up about 750,000 visits to these 3 in total so far. Now, excuse me whilst I sorry, I had to have a cough there. So our next breakthrough has been from the community of practice. So this came about after we did this presentation back in January 2020. One of the members of the audience was part of the team at the new radiophonic workshop, and they were working on this travel agency idea. And this went live in December. The other great thing about it is we have our own player, Story Player, but this version of it is actually on the BBC's website and uses the BBC's standard media player with a plug-in wrapper around it. So we can now get these object-based media experiences onto the main BBC websites. It's a very interesting experience, and it's one of those things where you go, I wouldn't have done it that way. And that's the joy of the input from the community of practice. We learned an awful lot from it, and we got people asking some very difficult questions about accessibility and about usability, which could only be stimulated by an external experience like this. So 2 new bits of news on the StoryKit front. The player is now available, Story Player, as a standalone open source player. So you can get hold of this. It's also available as a packaged, I think it's Electron app as well. So that's a step in enabling people to build stuff with StoryFormer and then actually be able to play it back locally and not just off of the BBC's servers. And as important, if not probably more important at this stage, is the schema which represents the way in which these things go together. We've managed to get that open source as well. And that's been really interesting because some of you may think this is sort of familiar. Weren't Rupert and Kate talking about something rather similar on a talk just a few weeks ago? Well, the answer is yes. And the nice thing about it is that actually we've known about Rupert and Kate's work for about the last 2.5 years, I think, when Rupert bounced up during a talk we were giving and said, hi, I'm working on something very similar. So we're now in a situation where we've been able to openly share our workings with Rupert, and Rupert's already making suggestions as to how we might improve some of our representations. And that means hopefully in the future we can get interoperation between these two tools, create in one, export to the other. This is the sort of community we really like to build. So I'm now going to give you a short tour, probably about 10 minutes, of the tool. If I stop sharing that one and then wait for the go ahead from Martin. And then I can share my web browser and push it full screen. So here is a view of the tool in action. Each of these elements is a container. This one is the introduction. That container contains, here we are, a media item, which is a JPEG picture. And here are the ways in which you can interact with it. The next, both items are all still pictures, and then we get to this one, which is a video of a bird feeder. This is from Autumn Watch, where we have some automatic cameras. Some of our colleagues are tagging them using AI, and I got my hands on the data and started playing with it in a very useful fashion. Watch out. We are hoping to get a quiz published on this soon, a bird watching quiz, and work with Springwatch over the next few weeks. So this is one of our nice sort of breakthroughs. This point here in this item, we have links to 4 items, so you can choose which bird you want to look at. Very simple, straightforward choice. So this is the sort of thing you want. Would you like to see this? Would you like to see that? An alternative approach to the same sort of thing is to take the idea of a quiz. So here in this one, you show one particular bird. Oops, I'm giving the answer away, if you can see that clearly. And the answer is then, which bird do you think it is? And you'll see when I show you the video, when you pick a blue tit and which is the same, we play the same bit of video. If you say great tit, we say, no, sorry, this is what a great tit looks like. So a couple of questions there. So it's interactive, but this time, instead of saying what you want, it's about asking you a question about challenging your knowledge. The third version is a sort of branching tree version. This is a little bit like His Dark Materials. What sort of bird are you? So you answer a couple of questions, and then you get to one or another of the birds. And then finally, we've got a little piece that works on what we call variables. So at the beginning of this, and I'm trying not to move it too quickly, sorry, we have what's called a variable input, which is a variable is an idea of a piece of stored knowledge across the way. A variable can also be adjusted by something you do. So in the case of the quiz, if you answer a question correctly, it increments your score. But in this case, and I'll just quickly show it, we have the user interaction, which is your favorite bird, and then you can edit that question here. And that results in the output. I'll just also show you how the choices work. So from this item, we have a number of links here to the different birds. I'm sorry, you probably can't read that text, but we then have the user interaction. So we have link choice here, and you can see options for the choice of link, and then present the choice of the goldfinch. The label is the goldfinch, and then you have the other three, and you can change those from text to images, and then you can have things like a countdown bar or no countdown bar. So let's show you what this looks like. Fingers crossed this actually runs. We had a little problem with my internet earlier. So the item plays, you can interact with it. Here's your variable input. So let's choose a robin. So our favorite bird is a robin, and we'll store that item for later. So now we get to which birds would you like to look at? Let's look at the goldfinch. So here it's just playing an item. We can then skip on to the next item. And see another example of a goldfinch on the feeders. As I say, this is from Autumn Watch, so thank you to the Autumn Spring Watch team for letting us use this content. So that's a simple choice of what you want to look at. So the quiz then take pretty much the same structure, except this time we show you a piece of video, and then we say, oh, oh no, it's not a cold tit, it's a blue tit. So click on the blue tit, correct, and next question. And then it's given you a score 1 out of 1. So there are two variables there. How many questions have you answered? How many have you got right? Oops, we didn't see that. Let's say it was a goldfinch. Wrong. Okay, so goldfinch actually looks like this, but then we saw one before. Oh, and we can remind you of your score. The other thing we can do is a social media share. So take that score and you can share it out onto Facebook or Twitter. And so now the third interaction, which is this sort of idea of 20 questions or a personality test type thing, much beloved of BBC Children's in some cases, as are quizzes. So are you larger? So are you yellow or gold? Oh, let's go for yellow this time. So if you're a larger bird and you're yellow, you're great tits. And we can add options for learning more and jump across to more content to learn more about a great tit. So we'll skip the extra content. And now for your favorite bird. And if you remember, I entered robin at the beginning of this. We've stored it, and now the branching is driven by that data point that we've set earlier on. And we are in a situation where we can write more complex logic around this, and that enables you to take a number of items and join them together. But if you're going to do that, please talk to us first. If you get hold of the tools, that's quite complex. The other thing I'm going to show you quite quickly is just jump in, is that we have a debug control panel down here, and that allows you as the author to jump to any particular item within the experience and set variables. So if something's going wrong, you can go and have a look at it and sort it out. So that's pretty much it from me, and I'll hand you back to Martin.
Thank you both very much. That was really good. Everybody in the chat, if you want to get some questions in, please do. We're gonna ask some questions, but I think I'm gonna kick things off. And Michael, you mentioned Stoneway's player, which is I think reasonably similar. I was wondering if you could sort of maybe talk a bit about the comparison between the two, and if people were starting out a project now, how should they think about choosing which tool to use for it?
Well, there are a number of considerations here. The sort of the sort of most obvious one of which is Stoneway is based in a commercial company, and the Storyformer is based in a public service corporation. So we have certain issues around public service use. That means that if we're providing these facilities and what have you, then it's within a sort of fair use within what we might call a public service context. So museums, Arts Council works, which Bronnie mentioned earlier. We've got call out for Dance Passion. Those sorts of things we're very comfortable with. The new Radiophonic Workshop, one of the BBC's partners, that works very well. If you are charging money for entry to something, then it's a commercial offering. Then Stoneway is obviously much more your starting point. The other thing is that the two tools come from two different starting points. Although actually it's not fair to call it starting points, because me and Rupert both have a passion for this kind of media. That's actually our starting point. But Rupert comes in as somebody and Kate with great deal of production experience, production workflows, scripting, how you make television programs. I mean, you work with NHU and others. So their tool in that respect is very closely focused on the workflows that you get with making an interactive film, particularly interactive narrative. It's got scripting tools built into it and things like that. So that, for somebody who wants to make a very simple, straightforward, branching narrative, is probably an easier starting point. Our tool started from the point of view, it's a research and development tool. So we are expanding our understanding of object-based media with this tool. It has broader capabilities, but it has many more sort of hooks and eyes in it. So the workflow is not as polished in terms of you offered lots more choices. You can get yourself lost perhaps a little more. It's also, because it's a research tool, we are evolving it. So it's under very active development. We are currently rebuilding the server side of it, what we call the back end, which shouldn't change the front end other than actually fix some of the little, make it a bit quicker, a bit more responsive. So it's so ours is an active development tool, and therefore and is built from the point of view of research engineers. So it tends to sort of show its working rather more clearly, and that's, you know, the sort of difference. The thing being, if we can interconnect, if we can interwork in terms of the being able to swap between the different data representations from the two tools, our ambition would be that you could use either tool and still publish to many different platforms, particularly, you know, into the BBC's platform. So it would be really cool to be able to say to somebody who likes Stoneway, okay, you work with Stoneway, but we can export to something that can play through the BBC standard media player. And likewise, be able to say to somebody who started on a project with us, to be able to then transfer to Stoneway because they've now got a commercial buyer for it or something like that, and not touch the sides. I mean, we know from Word documents and what have you, and PowerPoint versus the Mac tool, these things are not always smooth, but the fact that we've been talking to each other and keeping an eye on developments means that with any luck that this will turn into a broader industry of different tools which can interoperate. And the more we learn by having people use our tools, the more we can learn about it and develop them.
Great, thanks. So first question from the chat. Vic Tillotson asks, can you talk a bit more about who the tools are aimed at? And who are these people that you imagine are going to engage with these? I guess, Bronnie, that's more of a question for you.
Yeah, so we're looking, I mean, as I mentioned very briefly, sort of producers, creative technologists, producer developers, a whole range of people really. We're not sort of overly prescriptive about who can and can't use these tools. Our main thing is people that are kind of curious and want to kind of adopt these new ways of working, these new formats, and to offer our own experience, but also to gain feedback from other people. So tell us, you know, as Mike's mentioned before, like tell us we've done it completely wrong. That's all we want. Like we want people that are creative and are going to pick up these tools and run with them in a completely different direction. So if anybody is sort of thinking, oh, I've not got the right skills, or I'm not quite the right person, do get in touch with us, because, you know, we're open to all sorts of projects and ideas. So we'd love to chat with you.
Yeah, and I think one of the key things here is that we developed StoryFormer, and I think the audio team had a similar view on Audio Orchestrator, to make something that is much more accessible to people who don't write JavaScript or Python code or C++ code, because we were working in a territory where you had to write computer code to do this sort of thing. I mean, in the games industry, getting there with tools like Unity, but you know, it was about making interactive and immersive media creation accessible to people that didn't necessarily have computing skills. You can come with computing skills, but this is about broadening the user base, broadening the accessibility of it.
Right. And just to follow up on that, there is still, though, that restriction about charging for things. And I know, well, for a lot of people, that's going to be an issue, because, you know, people need to charge for their work in order to support themselves through the development of the work. So I was wondering, is there, like, what is the thinking on that in terms of making it available to people who aren't necessarily money-grubbing commercial entities, but still do need to, you know, pay the rent somehow?
So we have the tool, the schema, and the player out there as open source. So the usual open source rules apply to that. So that is exploitable within the terms of the license. That's much broader. We're at a situation now, and this is kind of like hopeful. I am hopeful. Now we're changing the way the StoryFormer server works, and this is work in progress. They are literally have it in bits at the moment, working on a new version. We may be able to open source the actual StoryFormer code itself. That's an ambition that I have. Whether or not it becomes our priority, we don't know. But it's ultimately what we want to see as an organization is an ecosystem of different tools which people can use. And those tools will be a mixture of sort of in-house that maybe we have restrictions around because it sits on our servers, and then tools that are out in the market. The other thing is, because the schema that we use is now open sourced, anybody, and we're back to programming skills, you can write your own code to create these experiences. And that's something I've actually been doing for the past year or so, because I'm creating content like that bird quiz you saw, that was based on something that was actually built by a piece of Python code. So I took the database of bird sightings from our AI production team and used code to sort out which birds to display and build the basis of that quiz entirely automatically. There is no user interface. It's command line, one line, go sort of approach. So there is the opportunity for people to do that. At the moment, we're pondering whether or not we can offer a library that people can then, a library of Python code that people can then plug into to create their own experiences with relatively low effort. And that's our ambition, at least, because as we're finding, once you have a computer building something, a piece of production that might have taken you a week suddenly takes about 20 seconds. Okay, you have to tidy it up afterwards. It's not going to be perfect. If the AI got the bird wrong, then that's not good. So you have to go and look at it. You have to check it over. But it might take a day for you to get something polished rather than an entire week. And it's that focus that we've taken around automated tools that we think is one main feature of this, because at the moment we're making one-offs like Click, like the radiophonic travel agency, which take a long time to come to fruition. If we want to have something that goes out every day, then a lot of automation has to go behind it in order that a producer can go, oh, that story, and that story, put it into the pot, build today's version, as we do with the Today program or You and Yours. It goes out every day. If we can get to that sort of level of ease of use, we stand a chance of getting mass adoption.
Great. That feeds in really nicely to a question that I had, which is, as you said, these projects can just spiral out into huge amounts of work, and once you add any sort of branching, you're obviously exponentially increasing the size of the project you're working on. I was wondering, what techniques have you seen in use that to manage that workload, to get it down to a reasonable level?
So, I mean, I think, yes, my focus, as I say, has been to use a data-driven build process. And what that means is that you have decided on a template, form a structure. Like with, say, Radio 4's Today program, it has a series of slots that are filled with news, that are filled with the weather, that are filled with thought for the day, that are filled with the main political interview of the day, and then other stories that sit around it. But that structure is the same every day. And if you change it, the audience complains because they missed their bus, because the thing was 20 minutes late or something like that. So although we think of radio programs as being, different every day, underneath that is this consistent structure. Now, if we use a consistent structure for an experience, such as the bird quiz, let's say we have always 8 questions, always 8 species, make a template, you then drop into that, today's pictures from the Springwatch cameras, and you get a new quiz every day with, in this case, in my case, 32 bits of video, but it could just be 8 bits of video, because you could always repeat the same one for the answer. And that means it's that kind of templating, that kind of structure, that means we've then looked at, very briefly, but we now have in our back pocket waiting for somebody to come and use it, a web form that you fill in to make a quiz. So you fill in the question, you fill in the correct answer, you fill in the wrong answers, you do the next one. And it doesn't allow you to particularly control the way it works. But by taking that, by making it consistent, it's relatively quick then to take a quiz structure that you've come up with, a set of quiz questions you've come up with, populate it and publish. And it's that intermediate step where we've come up with we hope to get to, you come up with a successful formula, of which quiz is a great one. We know from many years' experience, the audience love it. And those sorts of things we can then repeat on a regular basis using a tool which just allows that creation, rather than giving you the whole suite of options, which is what StoryFormer gives you. If you like, that StoryFormer's weakness is that you can build almost anything with it, and almost anything gives you exponential growth in options and exponential problems if you've gone and made a mistake somewhere and can't find it. We have also got a few tools tucked away in the background, and I'll just bring up the page. We have something we call Story Analyzer, which is part of the toolkit, which allows you to see where you've got a piece of media missing, where you've got a node that you can't, an element you can't actually reach because nothing links to it, and things like that. So those are on our radar as we need tools that assist you. The other thing we need to do is to, it's kind of like make a cookbook with a few recipes in it, as to here are a few ways of making things. And in it, restrain people's ambitions, because it's very easy to wander off into the dungeon or the cave system and get completely lost at a first attempt, and then get lost and then give up. So we need to help people think about ways of constraining their ambition, but improving their effectiveness in producing something that fits their needs as an artist or as a producer.
Great. Yeah.
And that's what's really nice about our community as well. It's a place where people can share their experiences of what's really worked for them and what's not worked, and give advice. So that's really what we're looking for as well. So
that's great and really important, I think, because often the important thing about a tool is not what it can do, but how you use it, the patterns of work that develop around it. So we've got a few more specific questions. Loz Samuels in the chat, I think asking about Orchestrator. So interested in connecting with multiple devices to produce a soundscape. Could this be used with multiple users in an audience with many phones and Bluetooth activated for a kind of live outdoor performance?
That's possible if you can get the latency reasonable and the connectivity reasonable. It's I'm trying to remember, they did it at a conference a couple of years ago, probably now. They actually got at an audio conference, got the audience to connect, and I forget how many, but I think it was in the sort of 50 or 60 range in terms of number of devices. Of course, managing how you distribute the sound, which sounds you're going to put across it, the more devices, the more options that you have to handle. But that should be entirely possible. The other thing is, beneath it, just as an aside, underlying this is the ability to get devices connected across the internet timed to each other. So one of the things you can actually do, and we do it with, is it BBC Together, I think it is? Remember, Bronnie? Which is BBC Together, which is on our Taster site, which allows you to actually synchronize devices between different households in different locations. So whilst this tool doesn't do that thing specifically, there are a number of capabilities that are under the hood that we can do. We can use the timing model and the timing device, the timing server to create. So in principle, yes, artworks would be really wonderful.
Great. And we got another question from Sophie, who's the artistic director at Any One Thing. And she says, we've been developing a new piece of software over the last year to create and distribute interactive digital experiences. As a software maker, is there a possibility of sharing our work with you? And if so, what's the best way to get in touch?
The best way to get in touch, I imagine, would be to email us, Makerbox at bbc.co.uk. I'm sure we could pick up that conversation there.
Yes, if you give us an outline of what it is the software does, what you're trying to achieve with that, we can direct you at the most appropriate team to talk to, because there are a number of different teams working on audio experiences, working on rendered experiences, and in our case on blocks of linear media type experiences. So getting it to the right team, a little bit of detail, that would really help.
Great. So question, I think, where is this going to next? So it sounds like you've got a lot of interesting proof of concept stuff. Like where are you going with this? What's the next big thing?
Well, in the very near term, fingers crossed, we are hoping to work with the BBC Springwatch team and do some reactive responsive work with the outputs of the cameras from this season's Springwatch. So watch this space for some quizzes and possibly other experiences, if you know, because working with producers, the great thing is that they come up with a different point of view and oh, could we do this? And we get new ideas out of it, new challenges. Over the summer, then we also hope to be working with their social media team. So that's the sort of short to medium term. In the long term, as I was saying, you know, this sort of idea of templating, of using a series of different tools that allow us to create content, versions of content automatically. Excuse me, I'm just going to cough. Do you want to mute me, Martin?
You're fine.
Sorry about that. Is we are also working with our News Labs team, who are slicing up linear content. So they are looking at programs like You and Yours on Radio 4, Radio 4 Today program, World Services, Global News Podcast, and they are cutting them back up into the individual stories. So I'm taking those individual stories and then building them into digests on different topics and things like that. And again, this is where the scripting and the automation and the templating and a little bit of human intervention to make sure that things that shouldn't go out don't go out. Hopefully we'll develop a series of offerings for our digital platforms, which are better serve the digital platforms. Because if you think about Today program, might have lots of different interviews and interesting stories within it. But at the moment, when you go to play it back on BBC Sounds, all you get is the sort of headline, you know, current affairs news program for Radio 4. What we hope to have, at the moment, there's a trial of chapterization of You and Yours, Global News Podcast, and Woman's Hour. Of you go to BBC Sounds and you actually have the individual stories highlighted, and then moving on from that, once that becomes successful, then we'll look to have trials with object-based media built directly from those stories, and that will allow us to create, I mean, it could be creating your own personalized podcast built out of those stories because you're interested in stories from particular parts of the world or particular topics, or digests that you can interact with, so you can have a catch-up that you can go, oh, like, no, I've heard that story, oh, I don't know about that one, I'll hear more about that. So that's the kind of direction we're aiming in, what we call getting much better value or higher level of value out of our linear content. Watch this space for an IBC paper on the topic that I sent off this week.
Great. We are just coming up on 2 o'clock, so I'm going to very quickly ask you, what should people do if they want to get involved? What is the call to action here?
Visit us at bbc.co.uk/Makerbox. You can request access to all of the tools there, as well as access to the community forum. Or if you'd like to speak to a real human and not fill in a form on a website, you can email us to talk about your idea or anything else, which is makerbox@bbc.co.uk.
Great. Well, thank you very much, both of you, for being on. It's been great.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
All right. Before we go, please remember next week's talk is by studio resident David Smee. We'll be talking about his journey into the world of startups and how children's toys can help to stop animal extinction. And get news on all the future talks following us on @PM Studio UK on Twitter, @Pervasive Media Studio on Instagram, or subscribe to our newsletter on our website. Please don't forget, subscribe to the YouTube channel, press the button, give the video a thumbs up. The more subscribers we get, the more likes we get, the more we can share stories like this. And please do feel free to share the link. Captioned version of this video will be available to watch again shortly after we finish up. Thank you all for watching, and we'll see you here again next week.